Today we're going to talk about annuity. Annuity is a financial concept when the same amount of cash flows invested in every period over a span of time. So for example, if we invest $100 every year for next 4 years, that's an example of annuity. So annuity is actually of two types. One is ordinary annuity and other is annuity due. In case of ordinary annuity, payments are made in the end of the period. In case of due annuity, payments are made in the beginning of the period. So the example which we just saw is an example of annuity ordinary, and in the same timeline, if we just say these payments are made in the beginning of the period, it's an example of annuity due. So let's suppose we make these payments in the beginning of the period, so it's an example of annuity due. So in all cases, the present value of annuity due will always be greater than the present value of ordinary annuity. And the reason is very simple, because this first payment of $100 which we just saw here, it's we are not discounting this payment. That's the reason the present value of due is greater than the present value of ordinary. In fact, the future value of due annuity will also be greater than the future value of annuity ordinary. And the reason it's kind of same, uh, we will be compounding this $100 for one more extra period, which is between third and fourth. But in case the last payment will not be compounded, that's the reason the future value of annuity due will be greater than future value of ordinary annuity. Let's take an example. Let's try solving the same $100 example uh, using a calculator, financial calculator. Let's assume our interest rate is like 10%, period is 4, and the payment which we are making in case $100. So let's go back. First of all, we should clear this memory, which you guys all know. So let's start with 4. So before we start, I want to uh, uh, state one thing. This begin mode, if you see in calculator, that represent annuity due, because the payments are assumed to be made in the beginning of the period. You can change it to the end of the period, which we're gonna see. So by default, the calculator which you see it here, it will be in end of the period. So this is example of annuity due, and you should keep your calculator always in the end mode, because most of your questions assume the payments are made in the end of the period. So in this case, let's assume we're making the $100 payment in the end of the period. So this will be, since we are making the payment, let's make it negative. So this is payment, our period is 4 years, interest rate we talked about is 10%, and 0 is our present value. We compute this future value is simply 464, right? Let's write down case of, and this is $464. And let's go back. If we change our calculator to begin mode to simulate annuity due, so we can do this by second begin set Okay, now it's in begin mode. If we compute uh, future value, okay, since we clear the memory, okay, let's re-enter the data. So it's $100 negative, and 0 present value, interest rate 4 is, and compute future value, as you can see, is 5. So $510.